So wait there, omnes. Welcome to Land and Sea Section 4, this time the second part of Caesar's landing in Britain in 55 BC. But the barbarians were preventing our men. That's the main sentence. Everything else in this is a description of how they were doing this or what they were doing in the end. So just keep that in mind. This is the main sentence. It's quite removed. But the barbarians, with the concilio, with the plan of the Romans having been recognised, so we've got an adjective absolute with cognitus being a perfect passive participle, with their cavalry and war chariots having been sent forward, so another adjective absolute, primissus being another perfect passive participle, mostly of that type with which they were accustomed to use in battles, is what it literally is, but I've translated it as battle because that sounds a little bit better in English. Plerumque, mostly, literally in that type as an ablative here, with which, but that's a bit clunky in English, so of that type. Uti is one of those very strange words. Utor, I use, is a deponent verb that takes the ablative as its object as opposed to an accusative. Moving on. Having followed up, sequor is a deponent, so subsecuti is a perfect active participle. Having followed with the rest of their troops, so they were preventing our men, from literally to disembark, or to exit from the ships. So from disembarking from the ships. The main sentence here is the bit in pink and green. But the rest of it is all kind of an explanation. We've got an adjective absolute followed by another adjective absolute, followed by a qui clause, followed by a perfect active participle clause. So a lot of things going on as to how the British were preventing the Romans. Caesar never directly says in his De Bello Gallico exactly who the British tribe who were fighting here is, but it's probably the Cantiaci, who are the tribe living in Kent, and he definitely fights them next year when he returns in 54 BC. The British would have had a very wildly varying amount and quality of equipment. Caesar says that these guys were basically equipped the same as the Gauls who were fighting in France currently. So you'd have had everything from people wearing nothing, potentially, just having a spear and shield, all the way up to people having better gear than the Romans. Wealth would be an important part of that. The top-ranking guys would have been the guys in the war chariots. War chariots are not tanks. If you try to run someone over in one of them, the problem is that the horses are completely exposed in the front. And horses don't really like charging into big walls of sharp things, can't imagine why. So they would not do it, and if you try, someone will quite easily kill the horse and your entire chariot goes over and you die. They're not for that. What they're for, as Caesar actually says later on in the same book, you sort of, as you can see here, wheel around in front and throw missile weapons at them, and then eventually everyone sort of parks up, the charioteer moves the chariot back a little bit, and then you've got a small group of your most well-equipped and trained warriors who can basically be used as mounted infantry. The one exception to this is possibly the Hittite chariots, which were the big heavy things, which were heavily armoured. The horses were armoured, 3 guys on them, but that's not what most chariots are for, so in most movies, chariots would not work. Anyway, side point. Due to these causes, these reasons, there was the summa, the greatest, the utmost difficulty, because on account of their magnitude, their size, the ships were not able to be placed, that is a passive infinitive, except in the deep, literally. So, because, on account of their size, the ships were not able to be placed except in deep brackets water. So yeah, there's 3 different ways of saying because of in this sentence, which is quite annoying. Moreover, for our soldiers, literally, get to that in a second, didn't. In unknown places, with their manibus, with their hands encumbered and weighed down, oppressis, by a great and heavy load of arms. By a great and heavy load of arms, what Caesar means is the soldiers are fully equipped. You know, they've got the big Roman scutum shield, they'd have the Galea helmet, they'd have the lorica, probably lorica hamata, which is the chainmail, they'd have maybe a pilum or two, the javelins, etc, etc. They've got a load of gear, and trying to fight in water up to your chest or higher when you're carrying 30 kilograms of gear, that's not going to be fun. So that's the great and heavy load of arms. So their hands are impeded by having gear, and they're weighed down by their armour and that gear. At the same time, they had to jump down from the ships, keep their footing, sisto as I stand, so consisto is like standing together, but keep their footing in the waves, in the fluctibus, and fight with the enemy. Erat hasn't, strictly speaking, been translated. This is something called a gerundive of obligation, which is not in GCSE grammar, so you don't need to know how it works exactly, so you can just learn the translation. But literally, it was the jumping downness, the standing togetherness, and the fighting was necessary for, hence militibus being dative. Yeah, it's slightly complicated. Just learn the translation, let's be honest. You may also be thinking about this sort of stage, well, why didn't Caesar land his ships to make it easier? Ships are not really designed to be landed quite like this, and particularly this, which is a scene from the film Troy. If you did this, well, think about this beak, this rostrum, as it is called. That, as you can just about see in here, that's buried. That ship is going nowhere for a very long time, although actually as soon as the high tide comes in, that ship's actually got problems. However, this doesn't work. You can actually make it go backwards, and then actually you can just more or less wait for high tide and row away, which is better, but it's not going to be fast or easy, and even then you're still jumping down a considerable distance. Amphibious landings were not really a thing, or at least not much, in ancient warfare. There you go. When those men, literally, so those barbarians, either, so out gives us either or, either from dry, brackets land, or having advanced, progressi being a perfect active participle, a little bit into the water, with all their limbs, their arms, unencumbered. So we had here impeditis, encumbered, and now we have expeditis, unencumbered. In very well-known areas, I won't go back, but we had previously unknown areas, they were throwing their tela, their missiles, their thrown weapons, boldly. And they were urging on their horses who were used to this. Insue factos is a perfect passive participle, like there's horses who have become accustomed. Cum plus conjecurent and indeed incitarent these are cum clause. This is a cum clause. So here, cum means when. So the contrast is very strong. We have the British who know where they're doing, who know where they are. They're not weighed down in gear, and they're sort of only a little bit into the water, and they're just sort of throwing stuff and quickly attacking. They're using horses as well, so they're obviously a lot higher up out of the water, whereas Caesar's men are halfway underneath it, very unsure footing. Also, I feel like the unknown and known areas also responds not only to the footing, but also to the fact that for Caesar's men, this is some random semi-mythical island off way out into the middle of nowhere. The Senate gave Caesar, I think it was 21 days of public thanksgiving when they heard about him successfully-ish invading Britain, just because this was a completely unknown place. So for the British, this is their home island, they're going to fight strongly to defend it. Whereas for the Romans, this is some completely unknown place, so they'd be very worried. Hence, our men, nostri, terrified by which things, literally, so by these things, because it's the things in the previous sentence, and completely unexperienced. I think we had expertus in one of the previous sections, having something who is experienced. Obviously you become an expert. If you're imperitus, you are unexperienced. So, and completely unexperienced of this type of fight, this kind of fighting, they were not using the same alacrity, speed, liveliness is how I translated it, and studiousness, eagerness. If you're a student, you are eager to learn, theoretically. With which they were accustomed to use in literally pedestrian battles, so battles on foot, i.e. on land. Caesar's soldiers are not marines, they are people for fighting on land, so this is not a happy time for them. They are terrified by the weirdo British soldiers and being completely out of their depth, both literally out of their depth and metaphorically in some unknown land. So this is one of the nicer pictures I found, and this is actually, if anything, maybe here, this is a bit shallow. This ship cannot go much deeper, because it will ground itself in and possibly break a ram. So imagine these guys, but a little bit closer, and they're just sort of throwing stuff. Obviously, if you're on a horse, you can be almost out of the water swinging down on someone who is not going to be having a fun time. And that is the entirety of section 4. Very much Caesar presenting all of these difficulties that the Romans have, and why they were really struggling. And in section 5, the finale of Caesar, we see how he resolves the problem. Thank you very much, hope it helps.